Good morning, everybody. My name is Avis Jolly. I'm with the El Dorado Community Foundation. I'm the Impact Officer. I know a lot of you have been here over the last 2 sessions, but I also know we have some new people on board today. So again, thank you. This is the 3rd in our series about building a better nonprofit. Basically, this 3rd one is going to focus on fund development. Up until today, we have talked about basically organizational governance and stuff, and leadership and stuff. So getting that mission in place and that vision and stuff with that governance and leadership. And then last week we went into literally organizational basics. So how are you going to get the work done with the people? So the different committees you would have, the structure, policies and procedures have been covered in the last couple of weeks. Little tips on meeting minutes and agendas. A lot of chatter about developing your committees and building those boards and stuff. And that seems to be the biggest help needed. And we are definitely taking that internal to the foundation and having discussions about that. So that is super important. Today, we're going to move into the money, fund development. So once you have this beautiful mission that you want to do and you have this beautiful people that want to do it with you, how are you going to develop the funds to get it done and stuff? So today I will turn it over to Lois and to Kathy. Just a couple of housekeeping things. Again, rename yourself if you haven't done so already. Please keep yourself on mute throughout the presentation. Please leverage the chat. We so wanted to do this in person and we're not able to, but we have actually seen the chat working beautifully. Sharing of resources from organization to organization. I'll be on managing the chat as well as various of my coworkers, but also help each other out. We have seen people sharing resources across the chat. Please feel free to answer each other's questions and stuff. At the end of the day, you guys becoming better nonprofits makes our county a better place. So that is a super important thing. And then I'll also be gathering any questions that we don't get answered for Kathy and Lois to answer at the end of the session. And as usual, if you are new, this packet, the presentation, the recording, the chat will all be sent out to you no later than Monday in a nice little neat package from Chris Ringness. So if you can't keep up on your note taking, you will get it in a package from him come Monday. You'll get everything included. So Bill, anything else you'd like to add before we turn it over to them?
Oh, good, right. Because you're running into our time.
Oh, sorry. Go, Kathy. It is your show.
We are all very conscious of time here, and we are definitely doing our best to get you out. Now I'm looking at 11:03. No, I'm kidding. 11 o'clock. So anyway, introductions. I'm Kathy Haven. I have worked with the El Dorado Community Foundation for almost 2 years now. I got to know the El Dorado Community Foundation because I started writing grants for them. As a volunteer up here in Tahoe, I was involved in the immersion program at Bijou, and they needed lots of funding. And then I got involved in a lot of other nonprofits while I was raising, and I'm still raising, 3 children. And I met Bill like 12 years ago. And when Lene Boys retired, she called me up and we met for coffee right before the world shut down and said, you should do this. And I said, oh, let me think about this. But the remote part has worked. I come down to Placerville when needed about once a week, and it's been wonderful. And Lois has worked with El Dorado Community Foundation since 2018. She is retired, but she's not really retired because now this is her full-time job. And she is our donor services coordinator. So her and I are going to be working to help you understand resources for funding today. I'm going to touch mostly on grants, fundraising, and sponsorship, and she's really going to talk about donors, reporting requirements, and things like that. So our agenda looks like this. We're already through the first part of it with our introductions. We're going to show you what our goals are for you today. And then we're going to talk about the big chunk of our day is on the resources that you have out there as a nonprofit to bring in funds to keep your nonprofit strong and healthy. And we're going to finish with talking about the board's role and volunteer roles, depending what you have, or maybe you have both, in terms of this fund development. So the objectives are really simple. What resources are out there? What can you look for? And the role that your board and volunteers should be doing for you, with you, so that it's not just all on one person's shoulders. If you are here as an executive director or the lead of your nonprofit, often you take on more than maybe you should. And this will give you some ideas on how to transfer some of that. So let's jump right into it. Well, Ava set the bar pretty high last week with her car analogy that she ran through her whole slide presentation. I'm not going to pull that off. But Lois and I came up with the picnic table analogy. Your organization is the tabletop of this picnic table. For your organization to remain standing, to be strong, to be used for 20, 50 years, you have 4 legs of a table, and those 4 legs are your resources. And you can get those resources, that money, from these 4 different ideas. Grants would be the first leg. Donors and members would be the second leg. Fundraising is another leg, and sponsorship is a 4th leg. And before I go on, I want you to notice in the little right corner of the screen here, there are 3-legged picnic tables that stand just fine. Perhaps you don't have one of these going and you're not sure how to. That's okay. It works without it, but maybe after today's session, you'll have some ideas on what you could do to increase the stability of your picnic table. And in this picnic table analogy, your benches, those are your staff, your volunteers. They are attached to the legs of the table because they are supportive of the organization, but the resources help support them. And then lastly, the top of the table holds the plant that is potted and growing and flourishing, which of course is only happening if this picnic table is standing and in the sun and being supported by the 4 or 3 legs of the picnic table. So when you look at funding, think about diversity of funding. Think about not doing just one way, right? If in the wooden picnic table, 2 of those picnic legs fall, that table's not standing. For your sanity, for your longevity, you need more than one way of finding funds. So let's start with grants. This is my specialty. It's really overwhelming. People ask me, well, where can I find grants? That's a little hard to say because it depends on your organization and your mission. But I've categorized on where to find them based on 3 different groups. Wait, I already realized I forgot my first 2 polls, didn't I, Chris? Can we stop for a second? I would really like to see, so I know what we should emphasize. Chris, can you pull up the first poll, please? So I meant to start with the picnic table analogy, showing you the first poll. I would like to know what I need to focus the least on and the most on. And Lois and I are going to take this into consideration. Could you please answer which resource for funding is your organization the best at? The choices being grants, donors and/or membership, fundraising, sponsorship, or we struggle with them all, or we rock them all. Thank you. Give you another minute or 2. It looks like about half of you have filled it out. Thank you. Remember, we're putting these polls out here to try to get the best feedback for us to know what to give you in a presentation and what to forward on to you as we hear it. So it's looking, all right, sorry, still rolling in. There's so many of you. About 10 more seconds. About 20 of you who haven't answered, please answer the poll. All right, Chris, you want to end the poll for me and show the results? So the results show that the area you're best at in general is fundraising, grants, and then donors. But many of you, almost a third, a little more than a third, struggle with them all. So that's good to know. Please put into the chat if I go too fast or if Lois goes too fast, or if you have other questions that maybe we can answer afterwards. Okay, so now the next poll, Chris, I'm going to skip. Okay, I'm going to skip the next poll if you would, because I think this gave me a good answer. The next poll asked what you wanted the most help with, but I think I can see that. So going back to grants, sending you a list of grant opportunities doesn't really work. So I've instead decided to break it into 3 different ways of looking at grants. There are 3 different kinds of grants: foundations and nonprofits, things like El Dorado Community Foundation, or the women's funds that are in many of your community, or community service organizations like Kiwanis and Seroptimist and Rotary. They all put out grants. You can Google that. You might know somebody local who can give you information, but many of them run grants once a year. Some of them have them open all the time, and you can make requests that way. Businesses and corporations also have granting opportunities. Many of them have a branch of their organization, especially the big corporations, where they are trying to give back to their community. Wells Fargo, US Bank, every year needs to give out a certain amount of money. It is easy to reach out to them or Google them. Possibly you just find the website, but also going into a branch. They will be able to tell you when their granting is open or if it's open all year and where you need to look. Here up in Tahoe, Raley's does grants, Safeway does grants, and often it's in-kind contributions as well, which might help, but it's all your resources, all the big businesses have in your community probably have an organization, a little structure for granting. And then the last type of grants that are out there are government grants. I did give you 3 websites here. Government grants are a little intimidating, especially for small organizations, and they probably, if you are a small organization, would be the last place I'd go. The 3 different links here, the grants.gov is the US government, SAMHSA is Health and Human Services, and grants.california.gov is obviously California grants. Honestly, government grants, if you've never written one, I am happy to be a resource, but that would take an hour and a half in and of itself to go through. What I can tell you about government grants are leave yourself a lot of time. If you're interested in trying, start looking and look for things that aren't due for 6 months out. Start looking at the requirements. The nice thing about grants.gov is you can store a lot of the paperwork, the nitty-gritty of your organization in files on their website. And once you've done one, it's much easier to do the second and the third. But again, those are grants that take maybe a grant writer or a lot of experience to pull off. They're very specific, and it's kind of like a college application. You can get knocked out for the littlest thing. So if I were to have limited resources, I would really focus on the foundations and nonprofits and the businesses and corporations. So it's funny, I'm going to go over the grant basics. And yesterday I was on a meeting with Avis who had different basics, but my acronym works well for me. So I'm going to share that with you, but we will then put out another way to think of it if it works better for you. Avis, make yourself a note, but your basics were really good too yesterday. So the basics of a grant are organizational information. When you go to start writing a grant or asking for money, make sure you know the legal name of your organization, their EIN number. It's always going to ask that. Your address, your mission statement, your website. If you have a recent annual report, often it asks you to submit that somewhere if you have it. It looks really good if you can put that in there. And make sure you have your budget information. Those things are really important. Those are the first step for every grant that El Dorado Community Foundation puts out there. Before it gets to any committee to be reviewed, I look at it. These are the things I look at. If your EIN number doesn't show up with the IRS because you typed it in wrong, I immediately move the application to the side and it's not considered. If your mission statement doesn't fit with the grant that's being put out there for, let's say, youth, and your mission statement doesn't mention youth or your website doesn't mention youth, your chances of moving on are not very good. So organizational information is really important. If you don't know what your mission statement is, it's one of the first things I would look at. Then secondly, program and project information. Most grants are asking you to fill out an application for some new project or program that you are trying to build. Be sure you know the who, what, when, where. Community Foundation is going to open up in April that you are going to be eligible to apply for if you've attended all these sessions is a little different. It's not a program or a project. It's about your capacity. It's about what you want to do as an organization. You also need to know the who, what, when, where, and why. And then lastly, to be the most awesome applicant, please think of these 4 words in terms of most. Meaningful. So whatever you write, it needs to have meaning. Don't cut and paste. Write it. Show your passion. Show your organization's amazing work. Be on point. Be efficient. Rattling off about the organization when it has nothing to do with what you're applying for doesn't help you because you lose your reader. Be significant. Make sure you make it really clear what need are you meeting in the community with this new program, with this new project as in an organization who's trying to build capacity. Why? Why should we fund that? Why should the US government give you hundreds of thousands of dollars? What's the significance of your organization or your project? And lastly, be transparent. That's probably the biggest one. We train our evaluators. We just did an evaluator training yesterday. We train our evaluators to ask, what are they missing? So if you aren't being open and transparent, then it's very challenging for the reader because they're thinking, why didn't they mention that? Maybe maybe there's something we're not seeing here. So on point, significant, and transparent. And last but not least, do not forget to edit your work. That is a basic. Spelling errors are glaring. Word counts. Often there's a limit. Most grants come on an online platform now. And let's say there's a 250 word count at the bottom. Most online platforms will let you just keep typing. If you're not paying attention, it just cut you off somewhere and you're typing, it's not showing up. And it doesn't look good if you don't catch that. And then the grant reader is reading it and going, what happened? They didn't finish. So make sure you reread, make sure you follow the directions that are there. So I have a little, uh-oh, it's not moving forward. Am I frozen?
No, just give it a sec.
Well, now I'm going to go forward 10 if that's the case. There we go. Little humor. And then the grant writer is because miracle worker isn't an official job title. Would you please pull up poll 3 for me, Chris? Everybody take a moment. So do you have that grant writer miracle worker, paid or unpaid? If you'd take a moment and answer that. Yes, miracles happen for our organization. Or what's a grant writer? All right, Chris, I think we're pretty close. All but the last 10 people or so have answered. Do you want to show the results of the poll? It's actually interesting. I am so glad 54% of you have somebody who can do this for you. Hopefully you're on this presentation if you're one of the grant writers for your organization. And for those of you that don't have it, feel free to reach out. It's not hard. I have a biology degree and a master's in education. I had never written a grant before 2006. I believe one of my very first grants was to the El Dorado Community Foundation. There are tips and tools out there. We are a resource for you, but take a shot at it. It's not as hard as it looks. And in general, I think it is a great skill set to learn, and it improves your organization's capacity. So, I am having trouble moving forward. All right, so a little bit more about grants. The ask. When you're asking for money, You need to have vision, but you need to be realistic. Ask for what you need, not for what is offered. The grants that stand out, Tahoe Women's Community Fund puts grants out for up to $10,000 in our community in February and March. And every time we read them, the people that ask for, most people ask for $10,000 and they make their vision or their plan fit into that $10,000. The ones that really stand out, though, are the ones that ask for $9,200. And when you get to their budget, they've really thought it out. They need $9,200 to do A, B, and C. They've thought it out, they've explained it in their narrative, and it makes sense. It stands out if you are not asking for the exact full amount. Keep that in mind. And lastly, when you make the ask, be specific and precise. If it's for your organization, if it's a capacity building grant, make sure you point out that you are asking for, let's say, a web designer, and you're going to pay them. If you ask for $50,000 and it's for a web designer, that's not very specific. If you ask for $48,000 and you explain that $32,000 is going for his salary or her salary, and the other 16 is going for benefits and for retirement, that is much more thought out than just giving us a lump number, because we want to know, and every grantor wants to know, that their funds are being spent responsibly. So the application is our only look at that organization and if they're going to spend the funds responsibly. Secondly is management of the funds. So this is assuming you get the grant. If you get the grant, there is some sort of acknowledgement form that you have to sign. Many people just sign it and turn it back in. I notice that when we do ours, because many people skip sections. There might be a spot where it asks for your address or your initial. Read it carefully, know what you're agreeing to. In an acknowledgement form of some sort, there will be a timeline. It'll tell you how much money, it'll tell you what you can use the money for, basically what's in your application. That is very important, that when you sign that, you're agreeing to that. Secondly, once you've got funding, keep a separate spreadsheet for the different grants you get. Be sure you can tell the grantor exactly dollar for dollar how the money was spent. Don't stick the $5,000 you got from Sir Optimist into your fund and not know how that $5,000 was spent. If it needed to be spent on books for a school library, then put it on a spreadsheet, and maybe you buy 3 different sets of books that you're donating to a library or whatnot, but make sure you can show exactly how it works out. And usually you end up going a little over. That's okay, because if you spend $5,080, it shows that you've spent the $5,000 of their grant specifically on books, and the other 80 came from your general funds maybe. Next, make sure you send thank yous out, especially to your local organizations. We all live in small communities, word travel fast. Businesses, corporations, government grants, not as much, even though a thank you to a local business or a business in your community is not a bad idea. But send thank yous out, very important. The evaluators who spend the time looking at your grant love to see that, and the donors also. Lastly, if staff turnover occurs, which it does, especially over COVID, we've seen it, do not lose track of your grants. Somebody needs to know where those grants are. Google Drives are a beautiful thing. Make sure if somebody is leaving, the first thing you ask is, are you in charge of any of these grants? Because a final report will be due. It is not good. It's not going to leave you in good standing if you've lost track of a grant and have to be asked for the final report over and over again. So, Chris, I think we're up for poll 4. And this doesn't have so much to do with grants, but with turnover, because I think that helps us realize what our next step is for you in terms of helping you keep track of grants. Thank you. You guys are quick on this. Is staff or volunteer turnover an issue for your organization? The choices are easy. Yes, no, what staff, what volunteers? And I am so glad to see that that one is coming in very low. All right, Chris, you want to share those results for us? Okay, so for many of you, almost 40% People are coming and going. And for almost 50%, you're doing it. Well, this issue is not an issue. And then some of you are probably working solo. So for those of you that have people coming and going, that is very important that you are keeping some sort of log of grants that more than one person has access to. We've seen this a lot over the COVID time with people coming and going. Hopefully it's going to get better. And again, we are looking at putting something together for you to have access to people who might be interested to be on your board or volunteers or whatnot. So perhaps we can help you with this too. All right, let's move that poll out of the way. And lastly, in regards to grants is the reporting. And in regards to reporting, that's more than just reports. It's extensions and site visits as well. Some organizations, El Dorado Community Foundation being one of them, has developed site visits. We do site visits with organizations that we give a lot of money to. The reason we do site visits, it's twofold. It's for us to learn what's happening with the funds that we're donating out, and it's also meant to be a tool to make nonprofits have a resource in us to ask for questions and ask for help. So when you have a site visit, be prepared for it. Have those documents that we talked about at the beginning. Know your mission statement. If you've got a website, have that ready. Of course, site visits in the last year have mostly been virtual, which changes it a bit. But if it's in person, make sure you're showing where the funds have been spent. If there are tangible things to show those tangible things. And if it's less tangible, be sure you can explain them well. And be sure you have all the budgetary information available. As for the actual reporting, government grants usually have multiple reporting, often quarterly reports that are due. Put it in your calendar as soon as you receive the grant. Some of them send emails to remind, some do not. Businesses and corporations, some of them don't even require final reports. Some do, some require semi-annual if it's an annual grant. Be very specific. Each one is very specific. Most of those organizations will tell you in the form that you sign at the beginning what's expected. I would say the vast majority of grantors want a final report. Many grantors will send out a reminder, some will not. Again, when you receive a grant, the first thing I do when I get a grant is go into the calendar and about a week before that final report is due, set a reminder that I have a final report for Seroptimus due on June 1st. So around May 15th, I set myself a daily reminder that I'm going to have that due. And if Seroptimus is nice enough and sends me a template or a reminder that I have it due, great. But otherwise, it's on me. It's on my professionalism, and it really helps when an organization sends it in without even a reminder. It looks good for your organization. So file on time. If there's a template, follow it exactly. Answer in complete sentences, because when you do that, the organization or the grantor can pull the whole sentence out if they need to use it for something rather than the question and the answer. If asked, if you have pictures or videos, please create those, make those, use them, think about having them, because that's just a nice touch for people to feel like their funds were really appreciated. And lastly, be precise. That doesn't mean just, one word answers or one sentence answers, but don't write 5 paragraphs if only one is needed. Because again, you have, as many of you know, volunteers that are reading these and evaluating them, or even staff who we want to be respectful of time. And the third part of reporting are extensions. We didn't see too many time extensions allowed prior to COVID, but with COVID, I know El Dorado Community Foundation has changed policy to allow for extensions. And we, in terms of El Dorado Community Foundation, try to make everything work. But I think as time goes on, that's going to happen less and less. But if your organization is struggling to move forward with a grant because the world shuts down or whatnot, please think about, if you know about your grant and you have a year to spend the money, I'm pretty sure this month you know it's spent. Do wait until the final report is due to ask for a time extension. It's unprofessional. And I'm showing internet connections. Hopefully I don't lose you. With the time extensions, you can ask 3 months. The reading program we had set up at this school, ask for the time right then, or put an email out and say, so there's a chance that we're not going to spend this money in the year that we're required to. What would you like us to do? Some organizations have forms to fill out. Some say, thank you for letting us know. Please update us in 6 months. Some will just grant you an extension right then and there, but ask early, don't wait. All right. So I'm going to turn it over to Lois now to talk about donor development and membership.
All right. So this is, I'm glad to see that you're all interested in how to develop your donors. And I think we all are. So I'm curious about whether our donors grew or we have less. So I'm going to put up poll 5, please. Okay, so I think we're looking at the results. I think you can see this is kind of what we expected. We've been in an environment of a lot of change, and maintaining our numbers has been tough. Let's talk about. I think it's important. If you think about, let's go ahead and take that off. As we've got, so our results are, yeah, that's pretty much what we expected. We have fewer donors. Some of us are maintaining, and fortunately, 25% are growing in numbers and dollars. That's really good. In the last course, we talked about the importance of understanding who has responsibility for making sure you have the funding to fulfill your mission. Whether you're a working board, a governing board, a staff, volunteers, everybody has a part to play. We're going to focus now on donor development. Where and how will you get the funding? When you do, what are your responsibilities for spending and reporting? So let's now go to the next slide, thinking in terms of what we just responded to in that poll, showing us that many of us did not grow. Would it surprise you to know that 45% of nonprofits participating in a January study of 168 and over 1,000 donors reported increases in the number of donors? So little tracker guy up there, our little dog, he's sniffing out who your donors are. And I think the most important message is you need to know who your audience is and what happened to us. During COVID, our society underwent a whole new era of awareness of the comforts we were taking for granted. Media and government flooded us with the needs in the community. For those of you who did not see an increase, understanding why is important. Were you able to provide normal services? Was that why? Did you lose staff and volunteers? If you gained donors, was it because you were involved with assisting in the crisis? A good example is Hands for Hope. It was a wonderful example of capitalizing on the Caldor fire crisis by becoming part of the answer by providing a triage of services. They were able to provide additional support while giving the youth involved in their mission a positive focus. The result, good press, and we hope more future donors. The other thing that occurred with the foundation, and you may have found this too, is that many of us started working remotely. How did that work for you? Did it change the efficiency of your staff in some way, or did it make it worse? And so understanding that is really very important. What's today's paradigm? What are we dealing with today? We can't change the future without understanding what happened to us. And we know we went through 2 major crises this year. So let's look at it from where we are today. What's today's paradigm? Let's recognize the fundraising environment and how it's changed. Our demographics have changed. We've had a great dependency for a long time on our baby boomers and the over 60 age group for being our major donors. That group is declining. But there's a new age group, the 40 to 60 age group, that have entirely different expectations. And I think it's important we understand what those expectations are and how they want to be treated as we approach them. Direct mail today should not be addressed to Dear Donor. It's no longer appropriate. Everything needs to be consistent and personal. The choices for giving have been changed so much because of internet access. We all know someone who's gone to the GoFundMe pages. It's easier to quickly donate without attending a fundraiser. So let's think about our communication strategy and consider what the donor is reading, seeing, and hearing about your nonprofit. Every touch that they see and that tells your story is going to give them access to the opportunity. And they have so many choices now with the internet. Can you give recognition and gain more donors by advertising memberships and recurring donations? Make it easy. Being seen as a founding member can give credibility to your cause. People look to see who are the founding members, who's involved. Allowing members to give a small amount each month through a recurring credit card donation gives them convenience and a way to participate at a defined level. These are all things that you ought to start considering in your strategy as you approach this new market that is emerging, particularly if you look at the under 40 group, very, very technology oriented. And I think the important in this next course that Chris is going to do, he's going to be talking about how to reach out to that social media group, and that is really an important part of how we maintain and get new donors today. Our example is the recent Caldor fire. Our director had in place a disaster plan that he enacted with the staff immediately. Within days, our website had a place for donors to give. We alerted every local media outlet that we were available to take donations and direct them. We made ourselves available for interviews. We reached out to county services, the area nonprofits, and learned who could help and how. Within days, we raised $2 million. This was not because we are this amazing staff, which we are, but because we were able to eliminate the barrier for the donor to give. The donors would see it in the news, go to the website, click and donate without even leaving the couch. The number of donations that we received far out by online credit card donations way outweighed the number of checks that we received in the mail. So our paradigm has changed. Our donors want to work with us electronically. The additional learning was just simply having the importance of having community contacts and keeping them current. If you don't have a database of those, at least keep a notebook of them, because those contacts come into play in so many ways. Another opportunity to tell your story. There's a benefit in capitalizing in this new apartment. Will your fundraisers be in person or through social media activities? We all know we love Zoom now, don't we? I think we do. Think of it as an opportunity to add another venue for reaching out to donors. You can have both, and it works.
Lois, do you want me on this slide? The one I just moved to? I'm sorry to interrupt, but I think
Sure.
I was
Yeah, we can go.
slides. Just let me know when I'm supposed to switch slides, okay?
Okay, this slide is just dandy. Thank you. So we know we need to track our donors. And as with any intention, you need to have a plan for retaining and building your donor base. And without a plan, we're not going to make it happen. Current information tells us that the average for donor retention is 33%, but there are factors that would cause your particular goals to be different. If your main fundraising is an event and it is not attended by the same donors, you may have more one-time donors. If your marketing was geared towards your mission and the donors are a result of that effort, your retention is going to be higher. The best way to retain donors is to bring them to you in support of your mission. So every bit of your advertising, your notes, your newsletters, your website, your social media, video, needs to talk about your mission and what you're accomplishing. If your event is all about having a dog parade and your mission is to support youth camps, you will get donors interested in parading their dogs with funny hats, but not necessarily long-term supporters of your cause. Quoting Bill Roby, treat your donors as stockholders in your company. They are investing in you now and in the future. That includes reporting back to them on how the funds were spent. Never give a donor a reason to say no. Tailor your message towards the positive impact of your mission. Pay close attention to what your donors expect. Finally, and this is really the hardest, be consistent and regular in your communications. There are so many ways to show appreciation and touch the donors. It's okay if you have time to pick just one, as long as you do it consistently and with respect. I know we hear that you can't thank people enough, but in truth, if you thank them the right way and well, they will remember you. So, an example of membership offerings, somebody's asked me to say a little bit about membership offerings. Membership offerings can be a founding member. You can offer by levels of dollars and call them by name, say them, and there's many of the community funds have key holder, they call it, or regular members, or just the naming can come up. If you want help in brainstorming with naming, always think in terms of tying it back to your mission. Think about what you represent and what does that mean. But naming them is a little bit about recognition, but it's partly about naming a level so that you get somebody to say, I'm up for $200 or I'm up for $1,000 a year. So it's a mental commitment. I think a big thing now really is, and I'm seeing this a lot, this online credit card donation. Take advantage of that by making sure that you have recurring donations available so that you don't have to go back and send them notices that they automatically renew it, or they're paying you a small amount each month. Particularly in that lower age group, let's say from 26 to 45 and 50, they really do like the recurring donations. We see that a lot. So let's move now to how do we tell our story? Next slide. So you can see here, this is the cartoon, the fairy tales we tell our board members. It's just this wonderful, wealthy philanthropist just fell into our lap, and isn't it wonderful? And it takes care of everything. Storytelling is how you get there. Storytelling has always been the best way to reach an audience. It's why we have movies and songs. We remember by relating, and by relating, we care. Storytelling should be used to train volunteers, to thank donors, and of course, at all your fundraising events. The best high school history teacher I had was Mr. Dobry. He would literally act out historical events in the classroom. He had the attention of every student when he launched into swinging his sword and describing a battle. He made every historical moment memorable. And that's why you've got to make these stories part of your communication strategy to donors. It's how you'll get them to relate. And then here are kind of my rules about storytelling. There are lots of rules, and you can look it up on the internet of ways to tell your story. But the first one is, it's not about the storyteller. It's not about me. It's about the story that you're telling and your mission. So be careful about saying it's about El Dorado Community Foundation. It's not about El Dorado Community Foundation. It's about who we helped and how we helped. Be relatable to your audience. Make the story, set the scene in such a way that the story is a subject that is relatable to them. So if your audience is just broad community members, or it's community members who you think are interested in the homeless situation in our county, make the story relatable to them. Talk about what's going on in their neighborhoods and in other neighborhoods. Bring the story back. Be sure to be ethical about how you do it. Your audience has to be able to visualize your subject, but be careful that you're not identifying the subject that you're talking about. If you're going to actually have it be a donor story and identify the person, make sure you get permission to use their name or their picture or so on. We fall back a lot on kind of generic art, and I can give you a perfect example of being ethical. During the Caldor fire, we were handing out a lot of gift cards. It was very important to give these early evacuees some quick help. We had the local newspaper approach us and say they wanted to come take pictures of the people that were receiving in line, because our lines were going way out onto the street. We refused to do that. It wasn't, we felt we needed to, it wasn't ethical, that we needed to protect those people who were coming and asking for help. That's a good example of when not to. And make it simple and easy to share and connect it to your mission. During the Caldor fire, I spoke with several groups that had done fundraisers. And one of the stories that I gave was to try to get them to understand why it was important that we were giving money during evacuation. And I told the mother about one of the mothers of 3 little boys who left late at night to evacuate. And they had actually planned and had done some packing, but the boys ran out, got into the car, and when she got to Placerville to the evacuation center, she realized that the youngest boy didn't have any shoes. He hadn't packed any shoes, and he didn't have his shoes on. He ran out to the car barefooted. And for me, that epitomized the trauma the fire caused. I could absolutely imagine how frightened that little boy was to be woken up in the middle of the night and told to get to the car because a fire was coming, that he would run out in his bare feet. So set the scene, share the challenge, the need, let your viewer know what the need is, and then wrap it up. It's okay to use the ask at this point. And it's really simply telling the listener what they can do to help. Sometimes you do this in writing, but more often than not, this storytelling works so well, training your volunteers, your employees, anybody who's going to be talking about your organization should have a personal story that they relate to. So you need several stories. You need to let it be something that when someone tells about it, it's passionate to them. And it, again, ties back to your mission. They won't have to ask. I can tell another story about the Crisis Angel Network, where we help people, and one of our ladies who volunteers for lots of things was in the office one day, and we happened to be talking about the Crisis Angel Network. That following weekend, she went camping way off away from here. But around the campfire, somebody had said, well, what do you do? And she said, well, I'm really excited about this. And she told the story of the Crisis Angel Network. And a gentleman who they just met got up from his seat at the campfire, walked back into his trailer and wrote a check and handed it to her. Because she was able to tell that story and personally relate to it. And I think that's an important thing for we talk about how to get donors, how to keep them. Keep telling your story. Next slide, please. Did we have any questions off of that one? I know no.
You're doing good. We're hitting the chat.
Okay. How to get legacy donors. So legacy donors are those donors who make a decision to designate your nonprofit as a beneficiary of their assets. This is really important to the longevity of your organization. And the first rule to remember about this is that it's not limited to age. We always think, well, gosh, these are our older people that are thinking about what's going to happen. But it's not. It's almost anybody who has a will or maybe or a trust and maybe doesn't have has enough wherewithal that they don't have heirs that they want to leave things to. And an interesting thing is that they will self-identify themselves. Estate planning is about leaving a lasting legacy. Anyone with a desire can leave a legacy gift. Years ago at a credit union meeting, I shared a story about the founding professor who had gone around to the faculty with a shoebox to gather money to help other struggling faculty members. And that was how the credit union started. Towards the end of the evening, I noticed a lingering gentleman, and he was just eating cake. But he was just kind of standing off by himself and continued to eat cake. And I asked him if he liked the cake because it was from a local bakery. And he said, I knew Bob Coyle, and I remember him helping one of my friends. I'd like to move my money over to help. He self-identified. I didn't have to ask him. He self-identified from the story. And I think that's, it relates back to telling your story. It's how we get there. Common types of legacy gifts really are dealt in a will or their trust. They simply say, I bequest to the nonprofit a certain amount or part. One of the really popular ones right now is gifts from retirement plans. There is something called a required minimum distribution. This is a distribution that when you get your retirement plan at a certain age, you have to take some of the money out. And that money that you get then is then taxed. It wasn't taxed before, now it's taxed as regular income. And if you already have other income, then that taxation portion can be pretty high, and maybe you don't need that money. So a lot of donors are opting to donate a part, a percentage of it, or all of it to a charity. And that's a very common one that we're getting, and it usually occurs during the giving season from October to December is when it usually comes up. So making sure that you have something on your website that says that you can accept those and why it's an advantage. Life insurance beneficiary. A lot of people have life insurance. Maybe their spouse has already passed and they would like to give their life insurance to their charity. Charitable annuities and charitable remainder trusts are also another vehicle. These are gifts that pay the donors or the heirs income while preserving the capital of the asset. But then once that, either a portion of it or once they pass, then the remainder goes to your nonprofit. If you get questions about that, get an estate planner or a fiduciary involved. And if you're looking for, if you don't know a fiduciary or an estate planner and they're just kind of asking you about it, give me a call or give Bill a call. We'll get you in touch with somebody that can help right away. We have lots of fiduciary partners. Get them to assist you. And then there's the gifts of assets. These can be anything from land to stock to artwork, things that people feel that their personal assets are valuable. You need to address those in your gift policy and decide what you're going to do with them. But they are good gifts, and if you know how to handle them, they can be dealt with. Next slide, please. But, oh, wait a minute. I wasn't quite through, I guess. Anyway, my last one was don't give tax advice. If you're going to advertise them, you can advertise if you're going to have legacy donors. This is another segment of donors, and it's good to advertise them if you can, but be sure and ask permission. We talked about the ethicability about this. When you get a legacy donor, basically it's a promise that when they pass, we'll give you money, a promise that it will come in the future. These things are revocable, so don't book them. It isn't normal for you to book them on your books as a donation. Do track them because you want to know about them. And generally there'll be a trustee involved if it's complex, and you'll be notified at the time that these funds are coming. This is a one that I'm usually not big on a lot of printed materials today. You know, we have our websites and the internet has become the way, but this is one where you do need a brochure available. Have it available for visits to your office, have it available for events. It's more, this is a passive invite. Let them know that you can accept these kinds of gifts. And like I said before, they will self-identify themselves. Okay, now I'm going to turn, unless are there questions I need to answer, or are you going to wait till the end, Davis?
I do not see anything right now.
Okay,
which
good.
I'm
All
impressed because I expected to see some out of the will, trust, and retirement plans, and et cetera.
Well, the other thing I would say on this is I'm a resource. Please feel free to call me and ask me questions if you're kind of struggling with how you want to set this up. I'm happy to help. So I'm going to turn it over to
Lois.
Huh?
So
Yes.
just really quickly, I just want to add a component to this. For your organization, take a look at creating a gift acceptance policy.
I'm going to go there, Bill.
Oh, you are?
Yep.
Okay, never mind.
You're ahead of us, Bill. You're too quick. All right, we're going on to the third and fourth leg of our picnic table analogy. Start with fundraising. The key to successful fundraising, as with everything, is having the right attitude. Begging often works. No, I'm kidding. Okay, so I put fundraising and sponsorship together for this presentation, because we're on an hour and a half, but also because I think some of it goes hand in hand. So with fundraising, and if I remember correctly from the poll, this is what many of you may have your own ideas about this, but so with fundraising, can we start with a poll? I would like to know what your biggest challenges are for fundraising. Is it finding board members or volunteers to organize a fundraiser? Is it finding board members or volunteers to execute the fundraiser? Is it coming up with creative ideas? Finding dollars to put a fundraiser together? Or none? We've got it down. And if you choose this one, it's really hard for me to follow along in the chat, but maybe Avis, you can jump in. It would be wonderful if you would want to share in the chat a fundraising idea of yours, or a tactic or a tool that you have that makes you the master at fundraising. And the reason I say that is one of the things I hope that you get from this, or all of these 5 meetings that we're having, is that you have connections with other people here. There are 79 participants on this Zoom call today. That means there's 79 brains that might all working together will do a better job. So if you have a great idea for fundraising or a great tool that you use, please share it in the chat. These chats will be emailed out to everybody that's here today also. Okay, we'll give it another minute or 30 seconds. Almost everybody has answered. If you're not able to
Kathy,
answer,
a lot
Yeah.
of people are saying that they would pick 1 and 2 in the chat. I
Okay.
think you're going to see those as a
That's
couple of your
okay.
biggest.
Okay, that's good to know because I wasn't sure if I should separate that or leave it together. But I know for some people, it's the organization that's challenging and for some the execution, and maybe I should have made both the third choice. All right, let's end the poll, Chris, and share the results. Thank you. It looks pretty even, but the biggest number out there is the creative ideas for fundraising. And I would agree that is the hardest piece for most organizations. And then that's funny that some of you thought both, because look how we split that up with organizing and executing the fundraiser. About a quarter of the organizations out there today. Good to know that finding the dollars to put a fundraiser together isn't an issue. And those of you who wrote none, I'm going to quickly open the chat so I can see if anybody gave us a idea. Not yet. Somebody did. Thank you, Kathy. Yeah, COVID has put a huge damper on fundraising for many, many organizations, the lack of in-person events. But I have to say, I do think COVID has made many organizations more creative. It is amazing from what I see out on the internet for fundraising ideas that really seem to be coming through.
Yes, Nicole, spaghetti feeds and crab feeds.
Yeah, we can't have too many spaghetti feeds, can we? So let's talk about all of that a little bit. So fundraising, here are some keys. And I think it's very telling that many of you have a hard time finding staff or volunteers or board members to help organize and execute, because it is important to find a passionate committee to help do that. So Bill, I think the big message I'm getting from these last 3 meetings we've had is that we need to put some sort of like volunteer board member showcase together where we invite people who might be interested, and then we invite organizations to come and say, here's what I'm looking for, who wants to help? Because, I mean, this is just another one. Thanks, Bill. So keep in mind, we are looking into doing that and having some sort of meeting, maybe soon, if we can do in person, so we can help you find board members and volunteers. Because for fundraising, for grant writing, for organizational structure, the passionate people are very important. Create a timeline, make the jobs reasonable. It is true we can't have 50 spaghetti feeds all at once, but we can have 20 spaghetti feeds if we're all in communication and not doing it in the same week. I think creating a timeline and showing that timeline to people who are interested or may be interested is also a way to show that you're organized and to show them that it's just not so much to take on. Let's go with the little organizations like PTAs, where all they do is fundraise. PTAs struggle because their organization leadership changes usually every year, and it's not a turnover, it's just a change. But if they have a plan in place before the change happens and they break down fundraising ideas for, let's say, the next group coming in, and there's a list to show what needs to be done, instead of saying, okay, you guys need to run a walkathon. You know, a lot of people are scratching their heads like, I have no idea how to do that. But if you create a timeline and you create a list of activities that needs to get done or jobs that seem reasonable to people and break it apart into 3 or 4 jobs, it makes it that people want to sign up or that are willing to sign up because it's not so intimidating. Remember, there's a lot of people out there, I think, in my experience, people want to help. They just don't know how. And if the more specific you can be on how to help, the more willing they are. Create a realistic budget and plan. Sounds like if many of you are not looking for dollars to fundraise, you probably have a realistic budget, but the plan goes back to the timeline and the timetable and the reasonable jobs. Make a plan that people feel like, well, I could do that if I had half an hour in the evening. I could write 5 letters or email out a letter to 10 people if that's all they need me to do right now. And then be creative. Funny, Nicole, that you said spaghetti dinners, because I said think beyond dinners, virtual events. Many people are having virtual events nowadays, wine tastings. I went to a wine tasting event where they sent me bottles of wine in the mail, and it was quite expensive because they had to send them mail. You could pay less and you could pick up the bottles of wine. And then we had this basically virtual dinner. It was in the middle of COVID, and they raised thousands of dollars because everybody needed something to do and they couldn't leave their house. Think about membership drives. A membership drive, and I know many organizations aren't really set up for membership, but it's not something that couldn't be started. When Lois was talking about memberships and donors, think about how your organization could use members. What could you give a member? Like the women's funds have it easy, right? They collect everybody's membership and then they donate the money back out. And in exchange for your membership, you get a vote on how the money is donated out. And that isn't so reasonable for Boys and Girls Club or Assistance League to let people have a vote. But what about if there was a membership you could join for a membership that was to get more information? Maybe Assistance League and Boys and Girls Club are helping children. So people want to be memberships if they're interested in helping children. And maybe in place of having a vote, they get an updated newsletter, or they get information sent as to where they can help if they want to help, or a video about one of the activities that they've done. You can have them be members and renew annually to keep the newsletters coming, or to keep the activities that they're doing with the kids coming, especially hopefully as we move out of COVID. But think about how doing membership is a little bit like sponsorship, but for individuals, so that they can feel included in your organization. And then also think about fun activities. I sit on a lot of boards, but I sit on the Babe Ruth board up here in Tahoe, and I've been elected to the fundraising chair. And my daughter is in high school playing basketball. She's a senior this year, and her coach did a free throw-a-thon. They had a great time. All they did was shoot 100 free throws, and they collected, $1 per shot they made. Well, we've just taken Babe Ruth. One of the first ideas I had for fundraising, which would be a fun activity and involves the kids and it involves the parents, is some sort of thon, some sort of batting-a-thon or catching, and we can do the exact same thing. But take a look at what's happening and see if you can alter it just a little to make it a more unique fundraiser or specific to your organization. There are plenty of dinners out there that were happening that aren't anymore. So I would also encourage you to think about bringing them back. I don't know the specific situation in your community, but many people, though we can't have 50 spaghetti feeds, I think right now we can have a lot of festivals and outdoor activities because people are missing those things. Then the other thing I would tell you about fundraising is talk to your community organizations that you work with or don't work with. Make sure events don't conflict. Perhaps you can even combine events to make it a double fundraiser. Let's go back to Assistance League and Boys and Girls Club, who both serve children. If they join forces, they have different email lists to put an activity together, and then they split the profits of fundraising. But it's a way to get groups to work together. It's a great way to get people to learn more about different groups. Maybe they only know about one of the two organizations. It's a way to make people feel included in a community, and the community is getting larger for them. When we started Tahoe Women's Community Fund up here in Tahoe, I was pretty connected. I've been part of the community for 20 years. I had no idea how many nonprofits were out there. And over time, because of the community events we do, fundraising or otherwise, we have learned so much about all the different great organizations, just like sitting here on Zoom with 79 of you, most of you on the West Slope. That is amazing and impressive. So if you create community connections with those organizations and create joint fundraising, you're going to see many more people attend and come. And then last but not least, like we've been saying with all the legs of this analogy with granting and donors, do not forget the thank yous. And often with the thank yous, if this is an event that can happen annually, think ahead. If it's possible to have the next year's date, send that thank you out to anybody that showed up or helped or organized and say, and next year we're planning to do this on August 28th. So people put it in their calendar and think, oh, I could help with that again. This was really fun. Don't forget to add that piece in. And then moving over to sponsorship. For sponsorship, I'll use Women's Fund again as an example. Our sponsorship model is really simple. We don't need a lot of sponsors, but we need, $5,000 is really helpful to run events with. Sponsorship is really simple. Look for local businesses or community members who have an interest in your mission. Ask if they want to sponsor to help with the overall organization, and in exchange, show them what they can get. For the Tahoe Women's Community Fund, we have about 10 organizations. They renew, and actually we have 2 community members too. They renew every year. We email them in September and ask if they would like to be named as our sponsors. We give them credit whenever possible. And if you know anything about Women's Fund, that's not very possible, especially over the last 2 years. But what we've done is every email we send out to our members, which is over 200 people, and we send emails out probably in the heavy times more than once a week, and in the light times at least once a month. But every email we send out has a banner naming our sponsors and thanking our sponsors. We've created a spreadsheet of these 10 sponsors, and when they renew, we've actually moved them all to the same month, and we ask them to renew. We very, very rarely have anybody bail. It took us about 3 years, maybe 2, to come up with 10 businesses that wanted to be a part of it. And it's as simple as that. We give them plenty of time, especially when we were setting it up. We were asking in June if they wanted to be the sponsor for the next year. Give them time to consider. Ask them when it would be a good time for them to donate. Perhaps June is a tough month because they have extra costs, especially if it's a small local business. And then make sure you're asking businesses that share your passion for whatever organization you are trying to get sponsorship for, or the community members. And don't forget that if you have a membership or you have donors, putting it out there for them to ask people or businesses is another way to get sponsors that you may not know about. Hey, Avis, I'm going to quickly take a pause because I can't look at, I'm looking at the chat box that shows that I have like 50 chats. Is there anything I need to address?
Nope, Bill and I are on them.
Okay. All right.
Great questions, you guys. And I have an acronym to spell out for someone right now, but yep.
Okay, great. Thanks, Avis. Okay. So going on to reporting requirements, Lois, you are up and we are down to.
Okay, I'm going to fly through this because you will get this in the slideshow, but what do we have? This is really kind of the less exciting part of what we have to do for donors, but we have to give them receipts. We don't actually, the fact is we don't have to, but they want their tax receipts and they need them for anything over $250. The expectation is that they will receive a receipt. It's not a requirement. It's an opportunity really to track your donors and have another opportunity to touch them. The foundation gives acknowledgments for donations for all online credit card donations, no matter the amount, and for all cash donations over $50. We do even if you have your fund app and your component fund at the foundation and your donations come there because you're using our 5013C, we do recommend that you also do your own thank you notes or make personal calls thanking your donors. It's the perfect time for you to, again, tell your story, as we've talked about before. The receipt should identify the nonprofit by name, the donor, by name, the description, and the amount of the gift. And I've put on here sample tax acknowledgement language that you can use. So when you get your slide, feel free to use this. And as you can see, we try to not determine whether or not it is tax deductible for the donor. That is for them to determine, or with their tax accountant. Okay, go ahead and go to the next slide. I don't think there's going to be many questions on that. We get a lot of in-kind donations because of the fundraisers that we do, and these are goods or services that we receive. You should also give receipts for those. The receipt has to be for the fair market value, not the amount raised for the donations. So for example, if you get 12 bottles of wine that are donated for your live auction, purchasing them at the winery might cost $250. At the live auction, you raised $1,000. The in-kind receipt to the donor can only be given for the $250, the fair market value of what it was. And your donation receipt should include the name of the event for the goods that are supported. So here I'm going to say where it gets a little fuzzy and you need to exercise care is something like a golf tournament where the donor is a sponsor for the event and they give you $1,000 for your golf tournament, but as part of it, they get 4 golfing tickets to play valued at $100 each. Your receipt should reflect the donation of $600 in the in-kind receipt. Hopefully that makes sense, and it's pretty simple. Okay, next slide. We're going to talk about the role of your board and your volunteers or staff. Ava's talked a lot about the type of board that you have. Do you have a board that is involved? And I think this is really important. And I've kind of listed off to the side. They need to share your passion. They need to be available, and they need to give financially. It's simple to simply say, I'm a supporter and donor, and a supporter can be, maybe their time is valued and that's their donation. That's fine. But when they're telling the story that you've trained them to tell, your specific stories, when they say that to a potential donor, or they're just sharing a story with friends or people that they know, their passion will come through if they're truly involved. And I think this is the number one thing. Go to the next slide, please. This was what Bill was alluding to. It's the board's responsibility, or staff, to set a gift policy. In your gift policy, and I'm going to let Bill pitch in here if he would like, but it should address the types of gifts that are acceptable. For instance, will you accept gifts of land or fixed assets? If you need to consider things like, if you're going to just open the door to any kind of gift besides cash, what would you do if you got it? If someone gave you their artwork, how would you value it? Where would you store it? How would you sell it? In most cases, you want to think in a really good policy is that all gifts should be easily convertible to cash, because that's what you need for your organization. Somebody has asked about a sample gift policy, and I do have one, and I'll put it in the chat in the response. It's a really good one, and it's published by the Council of Nonprofits. You can also look at the IRS publication 526 for the actual rules. Your gift policy should address whether or not you accept restricted gifts. So if somebody wants to give you $100,000, but they only want you to use it to pay for a specific youth camp, when you sponsor many youth camps, is that something that you're going to allow? Will you do that? Will you accept that gift? And how, if you do accept a restricted gift, how will you manage it? You need to track it. You need to make sure that it goes to where the restricted gift has been given. If you receive, this is the same thing. So if somebody's going to give you that restricted gift, make sure that you know where it's going to go. Bill, did you want to add anything on the gift policy? Just pop in there. You do.
Yeah, just 2 short points. For the Caldor fire, we made it very clear that all donations coming to the foundation were unrestricted. It would have been a nightmare if we had to manage restricted funding for particular purposes for that fire. So we did have a number of conversations with donors that wanted to restrict their funding. We explained to them that it just was not possible. Donors are usually very understanding if you give them a good rationale for that. The other one is always my favorite story, the San Bernardino Community Foundation. They were gifted a house by a donor who passed away. The house was valued at $350,000, and the foundation took it in as an asset into the foundation. The foundation then went to have it appraised to sell it, and found out that methamphetamine had been manufactured on the property, and the mitigation cost them close to $500,000. So there was a net loss there to the organization. It also opens you up to liability issues from legal perspectives. So whenever you're looking at land, any kind of property, any kind of house, you always want to make sure that you accept that into an LLC. So you're putting that in another asset class and maintaining that liability separately from your organization. That would be it.
Perfect. Thank you, Bill. So your gift policy should address all of those and clearly any benefit to the donor. So like I said, well, I'm going to publish the link. I see that Avis already put one link out there. I'll give you another one. But the other responsibility of your board is to track the success to your budget. So if you're having any kind of fundraising event or anything else that is going on with the donor money, particularly when it comes to restricted gifts, make sure that you track that success. And there's something that we sometimes overlook with fundraisers is make a decision up front. If a percentage of the fundraising that you make from the event is going to be for operations, and if a percentage is going to be for program services. So then your advertising needs to make sure that you address that for you. I've had a lot of donors recently because of some press related to some very large nonprofits be concerned about the amount of administrative overhead. Administrative overhead is real. Let your board discuss that and say, we understand that if we do this fundraiser, staff is going to be involved and it's going to cost us some money to do this. So it's okay to say 10% of this or 25% of this fundraiser is going to be to cover operations. That's perfectly okay. But the board should discuss it and make a decision about that. And that, be realistic and track the success. This is the fiduciary responsibility of your board or your finance committee. And the very last thing is celebrate the success. Just like we're going to celebrate that we are 7 minutes to 11 and we've finished our slide deck. I want to celebrate that. Go, Kathy. I'm turning it back to you, Kath, or Avis.
Unmute.
Sorry, I'm there. Sorry, I'm trying to get on. So I just want to remind everyone that all of this is going to come out to you recorded, and the chat will be out there as well. And please reach out to Lois and I. This was a lot to cover in an hour and a half. I'm sure I talked way too fast at the beginning, and I apologize. You can listen to me all over again when Chris sends out the recording. But anything that you think of after the fact, Lois and my job is this, and we like to help and we like to solve problems if there's something that you need help with. I hope you reach out. I hope you have gotten some new information. Perhaps some of you are, as qualified as I am to do this presentation, but hopefully we gave you a new idea or two to help you keep your organization strong and moving forward. Is there anything I missed, Davis?
I don't think so. Kathy, I think, you know, you and I were talking about in the chat early on, whenever you did the picnic table, you know, a lot of people were throwing out there that, hey, there's these other ways we get funds, we get fees for services, we have contracts with the government and stuff. I think Kathy today, right, if I'm right, you were just, you know, you were leaning on the biggies that we all talk about and stuff, and that seem to be common with all of us.
Well, and also the things that are ongoing, right? Grants and donors, you have to keep looking for new grants and new donors. You know, if you have a fee structure in place to charge, Avis, what was the example you gave? $5 a kid for doing something. I mean, that's a one-time decision of the board. We felt with an hour and a half to go, our picnic table analogy was for those revenue strains or those resources that are the ongoing battle. And that's what we wanted to focus on for all of you out there.
So definitely any of those questions you guys had about those other revenue streams, I think we hit them all, but if you have anything, please send them to us. Bill, you got something? I see he was good and put his hand up.
I do. Thank you, Avis. Fundraising is my passion. I think I've been asking for money since I was in kindergarten. So that doesn't bother me at all. And this is an offer for all of you. If you would like me to come to speak to your board about fundraising, about how you ask and to get comfortable in doing that, I'm happy to do that. It is very important. We're in a stage right now of change with the donor class. And I had put in the chat of how in the past we've always treated our donors in a very passive way. We reach out to them and we ask them to give. And there's a change happening within philanthropy where we need to move that to having them engage. So they actually become participants. So we're seeing right now an explosion of giving circles across the country. And that is a mechanism for people to engage in their giving. And so think about how you can do that internally. How do you take them from just providing a donation to you, from being a participant in your organization? All the statistics have shown that volunteers give a whole lot more than people that aren't associated with the organization. But you can also make it a mechanism where they don't have to volunteer, but somehow they're engaged in what you're doing. It's very critically important. That'd be it for me.
All right, and we are ending with 3 minutes to spare.
Awesome. So just again, next up, we've got another session in a couple of weeks that will be, I believe we have a week off and then we hit our next one. That'll be our marketing and communications. Oh, no week off. Thank you, Chris. No week off. Sorry, we are just pounding this out. I couldn't remember. So our next one will be our marketing and communications with Chris Agnes, and he's got some special guests, a special guest specific to West Slope and a specific guest specific to East Slope. So again, we look forward. If you haven't registered for that one, make sure you do. If it's not you and it's someone else in your organization, again, make sure that they get that. Several people were asking, yes, the package for this will probably be out no later than Monday. So that'll include the recording, the chat, the presentation, and as well as Kathy and Lois's emails. So if you have any follow-up questions, you can reach out to them. I know there were a lot of resources in the chat today and stuff. So you'll want to grab those when that chat comes out, or if there's something you want to follow up with them, they'll be available to take care of that. So again, thank you all so much for being here today.
The ending comment is one I tend to make at each of these is the foundation is a part of you, as part of the work you do. We're out here as a staff working to increase philanthropy in the community so we can deliver more funding back to you. So anything that we can do to assist you, we're here to help.
Definitely.
Awesome. All right, everybody, go out, stay safe, stay healthy, and we'll see some of you guys next week.
See you
Bye,
next
everybody.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.